Mike, is that the coming?
No, Art's not going to be here, I don't believe. No, that's not him. Yeah, I think he had a conflict, so we wouldn't be able to attend. This laptop's running a little slow, so just in the sake of time, we'll get started. Here goes something. As this thing gets going, we'll refer to the projected agenda. And right now we'll call the order at 10:34 a.m. And first item on the agenda, public comment. Does anyone have any comment on anything not on the agenda?
Yes, sir.
Please, if we could, this is being recorded and everything. If you could use the microphone, just state your name and.
Yes, Ray St. Peter. We're here on behalf of the parking of the vehicles behind Annie and the T's.
Okay.
Basically, the big trucks, loading trucks.
This is along South Beach extension between
Yes.
Oak Street and Broad Street.
Yes, Annie, you want to come up?
Is this going to
Yes. Yes.
Related to yellow line. This.
we're going to be talking about loading zones.
Yeah, if that's all right, we have an item number 2, review of downtown loading zones. If it's all right,
That's fine.
We as a group are going to go through recommendations for every loading zone, just to confirm how we feel. And at that time, as we're going through that process, perhaps you make a statement or two at that.
That'll be fine, sir.
Beautiful, thank you. That is not working quickly. So okay, I'll strike that as public. Any other public comment for anything on the agenda? Yes, sir? If you could go to the microphone, just state your name and describe the issue.
And I'm here primarily for the loading zone issue and blocking of streets downtown, but I do have another issue. I was here with you last year regarding the Westchester street lighting.
Mhm.
I think it was about this time last year. And we have a concern there are no street lights between Pilgrim and Crooked Lane on Westchester. And there's an area where there's a bad curve that's very dark. There's a lot of vegetation encroachment. After the meeting last year, it was cut back, so there was a refuge zone created for pedestrians, which was very good. And I think they cut it back this spring, I'm not sure. But it's still a problem. There are a lot of letters on file that were sent in last year.
Yeah.
And when we concluded last year, the committee had indicated that they were going to study the issue further, and I wanted to know what the results of that was.
I believe that was referred to DPW for review. The cutting was basically a first phase. The second phase was basically to see if there was any need for lighting
Right.
on that. I'm not sure. I'm not sure about that, so I'd have to consult.
Is there
with the
some way we
DPW
can keep
director.
that alive so that somebody continues to look at it? It is very dark there.
Mhm.
There are a lot of residents out that way that walk to town.
Yeah.
Some with baby carriages and that sort of thing, and they're mainly summer residents. I understand that.
Okay.
But and it's very, very dark there. And the solution would be very easy because there are poles all along that street
Yeah.
that carry electricity, and all you'd really need would be two street lights, and that would solve the problem.
What road is
Where
this
the
again?
curve is, it's around I think number 78 to 82 on Westchester. And the clear cutting really needs to be maintained because it grows right out to the end of the roadway, the edge of the roadway, and there's just no refuge. If somebody's coming, you're walking, you need to get off the road because a lot of times they come around the corner and they don't see it.
Understood. All right. Just to be clear, request for overhead street lamp in the vicinity of 78 to 82 Westchester Street. We'll add that to a future agenda. We'll talk about that
I
at our next
couldn't
meeting.
get the pole numbers for you, but the poles are numbered.
Yeah.
And I think one of them was 28 or something, but I'm not sure because the vegetation's all overgrown.
Gotcha.
But it would be a simple fix, and I think it would go a long way, because somebody's gonna get hit.
Understood.
The problem we run into with those, and I mean, I'm always a supporter of more light, from a public safety perspective, but I think every light pole we've ever approved, there's always been somebody in the next month wanting it removed because it shines in their window, it does this, does that. So I think the first thing that I would urge you to do is get a petition signed by all the persons who would be impacted by that, acknowledging that, and then I specifically identify where you want a light, like the pole number or whatever, and put that in a letter, and so a decision can be made up or down on it. But I mean, I can't think of a single time we've approved a light that the next week or the next month somebody wasn't in there complaining about that light.
The
So-
good news is the vegetation is so thick there
Well,
that you can't see from the road.
well, get a picture or something or an address
Also,
or whatever.
From last year, there are letters on file from, I think there are probably a dozen letters that you have on file that were sent in from the general manager of the Westmore Club, from the manager of the Old Westmore Farm Association, from many of the residents of the Old Westmore Farm Association, some of whom have property that opens onto Westchester. So that's in the file from last year. So
I'm not sure who has that file, 'cause I've never seen any letters
happy
about
to
that.
send them
but-
again.
We have the packets from the
Libby
previous
Libby
meetings.
has
I
it.
think I do recall
Libby
this.
and her assistant, what's her name?
Erica?
Erica has it all
Okay.
from last year, and it was this time last year that we had the discussion.
Okay.
So-
We'll review that material that was in our last year's packet and add that to
I'm
the
happy to
agenda for
work
next
on it. I
meeting.
mean, it just,
Yeah.
we had sort of staffed it up with letters sent in. I think just a couple of lights, and the new lights are shaded in such a way that there's very little light transmitted laterally. I would also recommend, I mean, that somebody study the new Smart Cities program, where the new street lights are really great that many cities are using, particularly San Diego has them. And from a public safety perspective, you can fund them with a reduction in energy costs, but they also gather information on traffic, on crime, you name it. It's really interesting.
No, with the automated and the motion sensors and all that, it's a bit of a heavy capital cost for the community.
San
so
Diego
it's
did it
something
for
to be-
40 million, they paid for it in 6 months.
There's, I
Big-
think we
big
need to work on a
city.
different type of system, but anyway, noted, and we'll take this up at our next.
And I just have one other issue, and it was in the letter that we'll talk about when we talk about loading zones, and that relates to street lighting downtown. I don't know if it's on the agenda or not. 22% of the street lights in the old historic district are out. We've been working with the DPW, and there has been progress made, but we still have a lot of street lights down in the core district, and the recent count, it was about 22% are out. And from public safety perspective, and they've been out for 6 months or more, ever since the storms last winter. And they haven't been repaired. And I understand that parts are on order and everything else, but we really need to get closure on this issue.
Understood. I didn't take down your name again. Could you say?
Bob Champion.
Bob Champion. Thank you.
We live at Old Westmore Farm Road, and I own the building at 12 Oak Street.
Very good. Thank you.
And many of also relative to street lighting, I know the DPW is working on this, but during the storms of last winter, many of the identifying numbers on the street lamp poles, which are at the base of the poles, were washed off during the winter. So it's a little difficult sometimes. The website's great. You can go to the website and you identify the pole, and you can tee it up and send a note. But we really need to get closure on this issue,
Understood.
because there are parts of the core that are very dark at night, and it was much worse, but it's getting better. But serious stuff.
Thank you for the comments.
Thank you.
Any other public comment? Yes, ma'am.
Morning. My name is Lydia Kennelly. I had attended the last meeting because of an issue on Ash Street relative to a dramatic sinking of my sidewalk as well as a blocked egress, emergency egress door. Basically, cars parking on the sidewalk instead of just on the street because it is narrow. They go all the way up within inches of my house, and the sidewalk is greatly diminished. What was passed at the last meeting was a sign they're going to be putting up that no parking on the sidewalk. And I was just curious when that might happen. And in the interim, I have cones. Can I put 3 cones up on an interim basis until that sign gets put up? That's the.
I'd advise against the other cones on the sidewalk. They may go missing or something like this. It wouldn't be encouraged. As far as the last recommendation, that does go to the town manager, and work orders do get generated. It takes a little bit of a time, especially in the summer season when recommendation made, mid to late July, and just takes a little while to get to it. So it's gonna.
I do have a lot of kids. My son and his friends are staying in that basement area where that emergency egress would be required.
Yeah.
And I've had trucks right up, literally. You could never get out of those egress doors. So can I at least put one by the egress doors? I don't care if it goes missing. I think I bought 3 of them.
You can't.
And so
by bylaw, you can't obstruct a sidewalk with anything. So, I don't know if anybody would do anything, but if you put them out there, you could be charged for obstructing the sidewalk.
I could be, but there are vehicles.
Well, that's
right?
a whole different issue.
Okay.
Believe me.
So in other words, if I called
Yeah.
traffic and told them to come down and that there's somebody blocking the sidewalk, would they do something about it?
No, because the Board of Selectmen has instructed the police department not to do that on sidewalks. If there's, it's a very complicated issue. Think about your street as one thing. Think of India Street as being another. Okay. And our problem on the enforcement side is how do we decide which street is which? So, the board is pretty much given us, not recently, but, in years past, that, there's some basic guidelines on what to follow there. And unless it's a complete obstruction and nobody has a way around it not to deal with it, because they were dealing with all the complaints from all the tickets we were writing. And now they're starting to look a different direction at it. So I don't know which way it's going to go ultimately, but when it comes to actually putting something out there like bollards, sawhorses, cones, whatever, that's a whole different bylaw. And, and if somebody complained, which they could complain because they park there every day and now they can't, you need to really wait till the signs get installed. And Ray, have you got a work order for that yet? So he hasn't even. Yeah. Okay. So it'll get through the system, but finding out about it in mid-July isn't going to get anything done this summer. I can most of the time assure you, but it will definitely be done.
So if I put that 1 cone out by that emergency egress, I will get in trouble. I will get.
You could. I'm not saying you will.
Yeah.
You could.
Yeah.
You could be liable for that. And if anything happens as a result of that, somebody steps out in the street to go around it and they get hit by a car, you're it. It's. I know it sounds weird, but that's why the bylaw is there, to prevent people from obstructing sidewalks. Parking's a whole different
egress,
issue.
if they,
Yeah.
for whatever, God, it's never happened, but God help, if something happens and
No,
they
I
had to get
understand.
out.
I understand that. But I'm just saying our official position is don't do it. What you do is your business and you live with the results of that if that happens. Okay?
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you. Any other public comment at all? Seeing none, we'll go to the first item on the agenda, discussion regarding parking enforcement related to yellow line parking on yellow lines. This is continued from July. Art's not here. I believe this was an issue he had requested to be put on the agenda.
Just a question about that for Ray. Have you got the work order for a no stopping, standing, or parking sign next to the hub? So nothing we acted on last month has made it.
It goes through town administration and then goes over to DPW. It's just kind of the sequence of things.
Okay. Just so you know what, Ray, we were talking about, that no parking area next to the hub there. We wanted that sign changed to, no parking, no stopping, standing, or parking We're trying to discourage the temporary stopping that occurs there and everything. So when you get that work order, you know what it's about.
There's some material in the packet for item number one. I think this is something Art had wanted to discuss, so if he's not here, we'll continue this to the next meeting, if that's all right. We'll go to item number.
Is that the parking on the sidewalks?
That is parking enforcement related to yellow lines, parking on shoulders inside the yellow line.
Yeah, and it's related to this picture that he sent?
It looks like a newer picture, but that looks related to parking on bike paths, which we've already taken.
Okay, we sent a, just to go with that, BPAC, is that the name of it?
Yes.
Sent a recommendation on some language that could be added to the regulations to deal with that. Two things. One is I think the bylaw already allows us to deal with it, or the regulations. But that beside the fact, I cleaned up the language, put it in a different format, so it's more proper, and sent it to the town manager for the select board for action on it. The only issue is going to be the posting of signs, and our recommendation is that it be posted at the beginning and end of each bike path and every quarter mile in between. That there be no parking on bike path or whatever. So once that's done, we can start enforcement. But it's going to take a public hearing on the regulation modification. I don't know if she's even looked at it yet. I'm guessing it'll be October before there's a public hearing, if not later. So it'll be an over the winter project to get that thing done.
So every quarter
It'll
mile
take a
posting.
lot of signs. We took 34 miles of bike paths.
Yeah.
On every quarter mile.
You gotta be able to give people adequate notice.
Yeah, you do.
You know, that they can't do that. I mean, you're out in the middle of nowhere and there's a big wide side patch of grass.
But 130 signs.
Yeah, they're used to it. But you got to give them notice if you don't want them to do it anymore.
Okay. Moving on to item number 2, review of downtown loading zones. There's a updated map in your packet and that we can refer to, but what I'm going to work off of is this list of recommendations and proposed changes. Some of these are not populated, that means probably no change at all, but we're going to go one by one through each one of these 24 locations. I'm going to project the map on there and just refer to this list for discussion. Item number 1, Harborview Way between Easton Street and McKay Way. That's right next to the Brent Point rural restaurant, I believe, used for their loading zone. There's no time posted for that loading zone, and there has been no proposed changes. Will there be a motion to take no action on any change for that loading zone?
That loading zone was put in years ago mainly for them with their laundry.
Mm-hmm.
They take their laundry from the hotel and take it, used to be down in Green Lumber, to wash it and take it back, and so they used it all day long.
Okay.
Getting laundry done. That's what the original intent was.
Okay. So having a time on that particular loading zone would kind of interfere with our operation. Okay, so
You could, I mean, you could check with them to see if they're actually doing laundry
yeah.
24 hours or it's just during the daytime or whatever.
Okay.
It would only be for them, and they're the only ones that can use that as a loading zone.
Anybody with commercial play can basically use that loading zone.
Right.
So if there's no recommendation to make changes, we'll just consensus to take no action.
The kitchen is right there too.
Yeah.
So they unload freight there to take into the kitchen.
Understood. Sir, do you have a question about this particular?
Yeah, a meeting like this, you normally have like nameplates and what people's roles are. I've not met some of the gentlemen here, and it'd be helpful if I just knew who, what their role was.
Sure. I'm Mike Burns, transportation planner, the chair of the group. We're gonna go down the line.
Nikki Rowland,
From
I'm the chair of the Commission on Disability.
Steve Murphy, I'm the fire chief.
Bill Pittman, I'm police chief.
Stephen Arsenault, Deputy Director of Public Works.
Jack Gardner. I've been here since the eighties when they started traffic safety.
It's just helpful, because sometimes I don't know people's names over the phone, so. Thank you very much.
Some of these meetings are less well attended than others, so we've never really had name tags or anything. Some of these guys need no introduction, but
No,
I assume some do.
I don't come to these meetings frequently, that's sort of my annual visit. You know?
Understood.
So sometimes I forget, so, thank you.
No problem. So if there's no action for this, with the consensus, take no action. Number 2, the South Beach Street between Harborview Way and McKay Way. This was noted by some of the delivery drivers that they use this as a loading zone. Suggested a loading zone be added to this location. When we discussed this in the past, we didn't want to designate a loading zone at this location, so if there's no consensus to make a change, we'll take no action on this location. 2, no action.
It's only one, just very limited use there. So.
Number 3, South Beach Street between C Street and Whalers Lane. Again, this is by the Yacht Club, an area where delivery drivers said that they do make deliveries at this spot, requested loading zone location. We decided to take, not to add one here, so if there's consensus, we'll take no action. Number 4, Whalers Lane between North Water Street and South Beach Street, the same issue. Sometimes used as a loading zone. If there's consensus to take no action, we'll go with that. Number 4, that was number 4.
That's 4.
Number 5, Broad Street between Center Street and Federal Street. This should generate some discussion, so I'll flip to the item in the packet. Steve, we had discussed it at the last meeting. We carried this over about is option number 1, relocating the loading zone on Broad Street from the Center Street intersection to either mid-block or Federal Street.
We discussed this in January or February, I want to say.
Mhm.
And the consensus at that meeting was to incorporate a crosswalk at Federal Street across, which would be the front of the loading zone. And then the ramp would end up being in the driveway of one of the inns, not putting it mid-block. And there was also some discussion, I remember, and looking back at the minutes, about removing that mid-block crosswalk as well.
No, that's the copy of the minutes are provided for this. So there is
I know it's probably not the one they want, but I think functionally, I think it would.
yeah, I think we left this with coordinating with the different
Yeah.
users of that, and they definitely had a preference for this mid-block location. The owner of the restaurant, Brotherhood, didn't want a loading zone until 4 p.m. So moving that loading zone to the Federal Street and with the crosswalk, relocating of the crosswalk, seems to be a middle ground. Of course, there's an expressed desire to have 2 loading zones in this area. Perhaps designating the one mid-block location as from 8 a.m. till noon. So that's something that we can discuss.
So you wanna put 2 of them on Broad Street at that area?
I wouldn't be in favor of that. I think one.
You're
Would be
taking up
fine.
Too many parking areas.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, 1 should be plenty.
The one at the top of the street gets really congested trying to make that turn down Broad Street.
It does.
That's improperly placed, really, and I think the one at the bottom is better than the middle.
I've got to back into it, that's the only problem.
Now, you should be able to pull in with the driveway and with the crosswalk, I think.
Based on some discussion here, I'm going to suggest that we like option 3 the best, removing the loading zone at Center Street, relocating it to Federal Street with a relocated crosswalk from mid-block to Federal Street. What this image doesn't show is the elimination of the mid-block crossing right at the Brotherhood. If I could suggest a motion, I would say that we approve option 3 with the removal of the mid-block crossing. That seems to be in line with what some members here agree with. Just note that there has been an expressed desire for an extra loading zone, particularly at the Center Street area. So,
I can tell you that it's a long distance from the people that are delivering to the back of the JC house. It's putting it down on Federal, that's a long, carrying beverages, and it's a long haul to go around.
It is.
The property there that you're putting in front of is a residential property.
Mhm.
It's not a guest house
Yeah.
or a restaurant, it's a residential property.
Yeah.
I don't know what their time of residence is or when they're here.
Yeah.
It's a gentleman from Chicago who owns it.
Understood.
What was the problem with putting it in front of the Brotherhood mid-block?
The issue there was the 4 p.m. They serve lunch basically, so having deliveries and that being used for deliveries from noon to 4 o'clock kind of interfered with business. That was just an express concern from the abutter. Quite honestly, I think that this was the preference of the all the different users of the loading zone was to have a mid-block. It's unmarked now and functions as a loading zone now.
I remember back in January that maybe I don't remember correctly, but I thought the preference back as far as maybe even a year ago, there was discussion of putting one in front of the town building too. Was a preferential when Nat was in here talking about putting one in.
Yeah, that's
So
kind of what
that
generated
goes
all these
back to
discussions
this,
and
right.
options. I think right now we're just trying to balance all the different demands of
Right.
the different users, the abutters, first responders. Any discussion about any of these options? Is there a motion for any specific option that we'd like to provide town administration for?
I make a motion, we put it in the center of the block.
You're
There,
gonna put it at Broad Street in front of the Brotherhood now?
yes.
We removing that middle crosswalk again, or?
Remove the middle crosswalk, that'll actually make the thing bigger. Remove the Center Street, or the one up by Center Street, and then support the future crosswalk there on Federal Street, which I don't know why we should wait too long for that. That should happen.
I remember that being part of the sidewalk improvement plan.
Yeah, ultimately we do want to have crossing there.
Yeah.
That's probably pretty much going to happen, and include the do not enter marking and signage and whatnot. So, Chief, would you make a motion to approve option 1 with the removal of the mid-block crosswalk? Does this option contain everything else that we want to do? It has the crosswalk, the future crosswalk at
Yes.
Battle Street.
That's my motion.
Option 1 with removal. Crossing.
And you gotta put it in the middle, and so that when its ramp is down, his ramp's gonna come out into the crosswalk.
Well, we're removing the
The
crosswalk.
crosswalk's out.
Yeah, I'm gonna remove that.
Correct. So it might.
That's a long street in that have no crosswalk.
Yeah, but practically every time you drive down there, especially at night, people dart out between those cars. That is a dangerous situation,
Yeah.
having a crosswalk coming between parked cars like that.
Yeah.
That should be avoided if possible, and it's not that far down to the next intersection, or from the one up there. There's very few people coming out of a place that aren't close to one or the other intersection.
Yeah. The existing, what would be the crosswalks, so they would be a 200-foot separation between the two. So that's not incredible. I'm sure there's still going to be crossing of the road mid-block, but it just won't be in a designated location. So, Chief,
And then if we-
motion. Sorry, go ahead.
No, and then if we remove the crosswalk, the loading ramp won't be an issue, because that was an issue before, is the loading ramp was always in the crosswalk, blocking the
I mean,
crosswalk.
I probably will get more complaints about the loading ramp blocking their driveway than that. But no matter where you put it, they're going to block the driveway. Or, that up here at the top of Broad Street, that drawing is kind of misleading, because the reality is anytime a truck's in there, their ramp is back across that crosswalk there. And just the other day, we could not make that corner because of a truck that was there. Actually, 2 trucks there, a UPS and then another one up to it. We had to have one of them move. So,
All right. So,
so just so you know where they moved, they moved up to in front of the corner there, that White House on the corner when we came back around. So that's where they're gonna use.
In front of the accessible space there on Center Street?
Yep.
Okay. I'm sure there will be a lot of live parking there and
Oh,
loading and
yeah.
unloading, just as a consequence of relocating that zone. There is a motion, I don't believe it's been seconded yet, for option one with the removal of the mid-block crossing. Is there a second to that motion?
A second.
I believe there's a question on the floor.
Yeah, why don't you just make these loading zones longer so they don't have the ramp problem? 'Cause
Parking, we're trying to preserve as much parking as we can.
what's more important, getting around the corner or the parking?
Well, that's a good question. So, getting around the corner is never a problem unless your house is on fire. Then it's a problem.
Right,
So,
you need to get around the corner.
so
at all
99, times out of 100, it's okay. So we just try to figure a way to balance, try to not eliminate as much parking as we can, but yet try to make things fit in the spaces we got.
The other thing is to
times.
take and
If
try
you
to,
need to get there that 1% of the time.
is trying to incorporate in driveways and
Driveways.
crosswalks as much as we can, but
Yeah.
without blocking the crosswalks.
But if the one that's there is with a little more towards, Federal Street.
Then we're removing parking.
Well, no, what'll happen is, okay, let's say we did that. All that'll happen is now 2 trucks will park there.
Yeah,
Instead of one, it'll still be blocked. That's what I was explaining.
Yeah, yeah.
There were 2 there the other day that we had to have one moved because you couldn't get around the corner. So if we made it longer, same thing's gonna happen. What we need to avoid is having the backs of loading trucks come into roadways or at intersections or corners. That's what we try to avoid as much as possible. We still have the trouble up on Oak Street, with that. But some places you just can't avoid it. But if there's a place you can, then that's what we try to avoid.
In order to avoid it, you do mark a 10 by 48-foot box and just use that box. But if there's somebody parked partially in there, or the driver just doesn't get into the boxes
Straight
like
as
he
they
should,
can.
that you get some issues of creeping into the public way and making turning difficult. Motion's been made by Bill Pittman, seconded by Jack Gardner. Any other discussion on the motion? If not, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
All right.
Any opposed? It's unanimous.
Removal of the crosswalk.
Yes, I guess, option one with the removal of the mid-block crossing. Yes, ma'am?
yeah, I was talking to Sarah Alger, and she said there was something that says, there's a 15-minute allowance for the truck to unload without being.
Well, the 15 minutes is any commercial vehicle can stop anywhere for 15 minutes. They don't even have to be in a loading zone. But, well, that's, what usually happens is they're parked there for a half hour. Somebody calls and complains, and we go there and we watch them for 15 minutes and tell them to move. And as soon as we start to write, okay, I'm moving. So, so it's, that's what usually happens. But they can park in a loading zone as long as it takes to unload. But they have to be actively unloading or loading. And what we catch occasionally is people parking there or trucks parking there and then going to lunch. And we'll stop, we'll go in and tell them they got to move.
Area number 6 on here is Easy Street between Broad Street and Oak Street. There was a request to add a loading zone because this is a bit of attractive. There has been really no recommendation made, so if there's no recommendation from the group, we'll agree consensus to take no action.
Which one was that one, Mike?
That's on Easy Street between Oak and Broad. I can't even think of the name of the restaurant that used to be there.
No, it's up there next to the.
Okay, I got you.
I
Down
can't
at the
think
other
of
end of the
Schooners.
Yep,
But
I got
basically
you.
They park
We're
next
good.
to the old Schooner building. And,
Yeah, no loading zone.
all right, so there's no action. Number 7, however, is South Beach Street extension between Broad and Oak Street. We did in the past make a recommendation to change the time from no, and I think we wrote a graphic in here for this.
It's 4 is when you read your graphic stuff.
We did make a recommendation to change the time from having no time to 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. It was approved at our January 16th, 2018 meeting. I'm happy to take maybe a motion for reaffirming this change. If not, we'll just take no action and move on if there's no change to this recommendation, or if there's any comments from the public at all. This is, I believe this was mentioned earlier as a sensitive area, so we can discuss that. And because there's a lot of people here doing that, we'll ask that each one go to the microphone just to take turns, because I think there's a lot of people that do want to talk about this.
Hi, I'm Annie Teasdale, and my building is the one to the lower part of the loading zone that's there now. And that's on my parking, which I came to meeting a year or two ago, where they said I should have access to my parking, of which they did paint a new yellow line there the other day. But the trucks are there for a couple hours all morning, and we made the Oak Street parking so they could go there and they could go back, but with their ramps, they have to pull right behind my whole parking lot. And so there's hours on end where we can't get in and out. And there seems to be, even though they made these loading zones, the trucks park there. And the guys are pretty nice, and I understand they've got so much to deliver because they do all of Broad Street, and then they go around to all the other restaurants. So they're there for hours, and we're stuck. And it's a major disturbance that they can't be anywhere else. Or we get individual smaller commercial vehicles on that Oak Street that leave their car there, and people just park because they don't seem to care if they get a ticket in town. And so we get the brunt of it all right there. I don't know what the proposal is to go further back towards the juice bar, which we tried to suggest a couple of years ago, because that's all open space, kind of a free-for-all, which I believe, some of the people have in-town stickers, so they leave their cars there all day. And then,
Well,
obviously,
they shouldn't, there's no sticker that allows anybody to park there all day.
Okay, so I know,
So-
then that's good to know, but
Yeah.
it's, their objection would be similar to mine, except I have to get in and out to work along with everyone else, and we do our own, van in and out, and we're stuck, I'd say 90% of the time, let alone all the cars that come pull up to go to the juice bar and don't move and leave them running. So it's kind of like we're trying to police our own neighborhood so we can get in and out. And I know that Bob across the street has the same issue, but they are pulled up right in front. You can see that white car that's parked. We can't get in and out. And I can be empathetic to their needs and the humidity and everything, but if our access is blocked, it's a pain in the neck. So I don't know how to resolve that, because last meeting we did get that Oak Street parking there, and there is one in front of the Dreamland, but 9 out of 10 times they used my back spot, and they're going to disregard the yellow line. They're just, I know they're trying to do their job, but they don't know where to go. They don't have any options. And it is the major, down on the Strip, there's so many restaurants, and then they've got the Rosencrown, and they've got the Lola, and then they go all around. And I know there's one on Federal. I don't know if it's a loading zone on Federal there, but that blocks the whole road too. I don't know what to propose there, except to go back towards the juice bar and closer to all the restaurants, the food places. So that's my thought, is to extend it, because there will be 3-4 trucks at a time, plus the FedEx, plus the UPS, plus the food. So it's one of the higher density delivery areas.
Okay, so you're right, your request is that this be made a 10 by 48 foot.
As long as you can, because they're
Square.
long trucks, and then they have the ramp, so they might pull up to the furthest extent of my parking lot, but then we have the ramp. And I'm telling you, they do not like to move their ramp for us to get in and out. It's like I have to bribe them with T-shirts.
Thank you.
Which is kind of...
Thank you for that. Sir, do you want to speak on this as well?
Yes.
Thank you. Please.
You talk a lot. You did good.
Are you in receipt, we have a correspondence of July 20th, which was addressed to Libby Gibson, Chief Pittman, Mike Burns, and Bob McNeil, with photographs?
We've received that. I don't believe it's in our meeting packet, but.
Okay, because there's some pretty interesting and informative photographs. I'll leave a copy with you if you want. But anyway, I second what Annie's saying. The problems we have are similar to hers. We have our building is in the corner of Oak and South Beach there. We have parking behind our building. People cannot get in and out of their parking. We also have, on the second floor of our building, residential apartments. And there are bedrooms all along South Beach Street. The trucks will pull up onto our property. Our property extends actually beyond the curb into the street. But they'll pull up onto our property with the refrigerators running and everything else, so that our tenants, early in the morning. So we don't have quiet enjoyment there. We have storm windows. We have thermopane windows. We're now installing acoustic interior panels to try to mitigate the sound. That's one issue. The other issue is just blocking. They'll pull up, trucks will pull up and just stop at the corner of Oak Street and South Beach there and unload, particularly even when the loading zones are empty. Creates problems for Annie, creates problems for us, can't get in and out of the parking, disturbs tenants, can't even see our building from South Water Street. I think that if we could extend that, I realize it's a problem. If we could extend the loading zone to the north there, I think that would be helpful.
Okay.
Another thing, it's a broader issue, but perhaps companies that make regular deliveries in the core district, perhaps the town could look at, as many other towns or cities have done, where there's constrained access of requiring people like the UPS and others to use smaller vehicles in the core district. UPS has a depot here. Many of the other delivery companies do too. Cape Cod Express does. I've talked to the general manager, that sort of thing. And perhaps that might go a long way to solve a lot of the problems that everybody's experiencing, is to break the loads down for just the loads that go to the core district.
Yeah.
And have different kind of vehicle or something.
Yeah.
This isn't going to get any better.
Yeah, I think some have actually done that. Cape Cod Express, they do a break a bulk operation. Instead of using a larger vehicle, they just use a smaller one. But the consequences are
For
more
instance,
frequent.
U.S. Food and Cisco,
More traffic, more vehicles.
very large semi vehicles.
They aren't local companies.
Right.
So therefore, they can't break down into smaller trucks. They come with a big truck and they deliver with the big truck.
Yeah, maybe they bring more, I don't know. The ferry congestion, I understand all that. The other thing is we've had property damage from the large vehicles. There at the entrance to our parking lot, there's a garbage, a dumpster enclosure. We've replaced the bollards, and these bollards go 3 feet down into the ground. They're steel, filled with concrete and rebar.
Yeah.
They go 3 feet down in the ground. They've been sheared off at ground level.
Okay.
We're trying to protect the fences, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
It's a real problem. And it's not only the congestion, limited accessibility, but it's also a problem with noise from the reefer units. And even if they're, we have these residences on the second floor, and we're trying to be mindful of their concerns as well.
Understood.
So.
Thank you for those comments.
What if we made that whole South Beach a loading zone during the day, and then eliminated the one on Oak Street there? That would take care of. They would have no excuse to pull up into their driveway. It's plenty of loading space. There is a lot of restaurants around there. I know it takes hours to unload sometimes and sort this out. And in answer to we did have Cape Cod Express did break down into smaller trucks because they're local.
Their general manager,
Yeah.
very helpful.
Problem is, they have to hire more staff to do that, and it increased the number of trucks downtown actually making
It's
deliveries.
interesting. I've
So
spoken to the general manager, the off-island general manager,
Yeah.
U.S. Food, Cisco, spoke to the Cape Cod Express on-island general manager, and they've all been very helpful. And the behavior changes. for 2 or 3 weeks.
Yep.
But then it reverts.
Yep.
Okay. Even I have a good friend who is the second largest consumer of products from Cisco and U.S. Food, and he has talked to his account rep as well. And this is a gentleman that runs 4 or 5 restaurants in town, and said, "Look, you can't be doing this." And so that helps as well.
Mm-hmm.
So, and I understand they've got to deliver the food. The other thing I have in this letter, which you can see, is trucks blocking the public way when the loading zones are empty. I mean,
Yep.
it's just
And we've been addressing that.
amazing to me, you know.
you
These
know,
guys
and-
have done great work in expanding the loading zones in front of the Dreamland, on Oak Street, this sort of thing. But for them to pull up, block the, and there's, I've got photos here, for them to pull up, block the street, block her parking, and the loading zone's empty.
Yeah.
I mean, that's just crazy.
Bill, I'm going to suggest you're making a motion to designate South Beach Extension from Broad Street.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
From
the
Broad,
parking area along South Beach Street be designated as a loading zone.
yes.
And I'm going to hold off on the Oak Street part of that recommendation until the next zone, because that's the very next one we're going to discuss.
That is used,
Okay.
that is used, but the other one that gets a lot of use, which is very good, is the one in front of the Dreamland.
Yep.
That's been very helpful, and for a lot of reasons, and for a lot of things. They've been using that a lot, which is great, because there's room for the ramps and, you know, that sort of thing.
Yeah, I think what effectively we're trying to do here is relocate the Oak Street one to the South Beach Extension, make that one long.
Yeah, because the Oak Street one is the one we have the trouble with the ramp going across the sidewalk on people walking down South Water there.
Yeah.
And it's a continual problem. So if we could eliminate that problem and this other problem by making the whole thing. And Broad Street, they're allowing cars to double park now, or going to officially when they redo that sidewalk there. So they can't say they don't have enough parking.
Okay. Well, it would create three more spaces, I guess, at least on Oak Street during the afternoon, which is probably more conducive for patron parking and not so much loading. They'll use the extension as functioning as a delivery alley. So designate the parking area along South Beach Extension as a loading zone. Is there a second to that motion?
Second.
Call Jack Gardner as a
Try it,
second.
see, I mean, I think that's a good suggestion, Chief.
Is that with the designation?
With the
8 a.m. to 4 p.m.?
Yes.
8 a.m. to 4 p.m.
Just, I have one other comment for the chief, since I'm here. We have challenges in the evening in this area. I think you and I have spoken about it before. We have challenges in our parking lot. People in there who shouldn't be in there, doing things they shouldn't be doing in there, drugs, that kind of thing. We have lights with motion sensors and everything else. We've done as much as we can, but this area is a problem, and I would encourage, and I know you're doing this, that your interns to make regular tours of the area, because we have some real challenges there at night.
Yeah, we're aware of it.
And this gets back to the streetlight issue.
Yeah.
So,
Thank you for that comment. We have a motion and second. Designate all of the parking on South Beach Extension as loading zone from 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. Those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Unanimous.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
I have one other issue. Are you gonna open comment at the end? Because I do want to talk about water in the downtown area, in that area.
That was probably more appropriate under public comment, but we'll if you want to stay for the end of the meeting, we can discuss that further.
Yeah. Thank you very much.
Area number 8. I'm going to go back to the large map here. No, that's not-
I'll give you a copy of this.
Thank you. Area number 8, Oak Street between South Water Street and South Beach Street Extension. I'll entertain a motion to eliminate this loading zone.
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That's unanimous. Area number 9, Federal Street between East Chestnut Street and Oak Street. We haven't had a recommendation to make any changes here. If there's consensus to take no action, we'll take no action. Number 10, India Street between Independence Lane and Federal Street. We've already approved a time change for this area along with a mid-block crossing at Independence Lane.
Okay, I was gonna say, as long as it's associated with an intersection, I don't have a problem.
If there's no change to that previous recommendation, we'll take no action.
I have a comment.
Go right ahead.
That you're talking about a crosswalk right across from Independence Lane.
Yes.
Would that become a brick paved crosswalk, or because it's cobblestone now? Is that
I believe that's the idea, is to have that be a brick crossing, just to get to the other side to where the Pearl and the boarding house is.
You know, the sidewalk on the other side is as bad as it gets. Is there an appropriate place for a curb cut, and will that work on that side?
I'll have to confer with Rob, but because there's no specification when we discussed it of whether it was going to be painted in or brick. So I'll have to discuss
I
it with
believe
Rob.
when we talked about that originally, it was for a brick crosswalk in order to facilitate the dollies and people with accessibility issues to get across.
That makes sense, though, what you're saying.
Great, thank you. I think right now we're just, Steve, we're approving these things conceptually, and obviously the engineering and the details and making sure it's accessible and all these other issues.
Leave it to you to make it happen.
No.
Troubleshoot that when you get to the construction. Area number 11, Center Street between India Street and Main Street. I'm losing my bearings on that. We actually recommended not to relocate that zone to the north, so if there's consensus, we'll take no action.
I think that's good the way it is.
Understood.
I think it's good too.
Yeah, they're starting to creep into the intersection, but it's better than what it is.
Yeah, well, that intersection, I agree, but it's not quite as bad as what
It's
it was.
not as
up
bad
on
as the other one, no.
so.
Area number 12, which is over on Cambridge Street between South Water Street and Easy Street on the east side of town. We haven't had any recommendation for changes there. By consensus, we'll take no action. Area 13 on Still Dock. There was a request to make this a loading zone, but we haven't had a recommendation. We'll take no action on that if there's consensus to do so. Is everybody clear on that Still Dock issue?
No, is that,
They back down there anyway, didn't they?
Yeah, the request was just to formally designate that a loading zone somewhere along Still Dock, but we can
I
just.
think they just back down there and stop and use it, and they block everybody while they're there, that's all.
yeah,
You
they
know,
get
it's
in
something
and
that
out.
people lived with all their lives.
And that whole area is all residential. There's no
Right,
anything in there.
you
Okay.
can't help but block it.
Yeah, so we'll take no action on that. Area 14 is New Whale Street between Straight Wharf and Commercial Street.
That one's gone anyway, right?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of, again, just double parking along the no parking areas.
Yeah.
But we don't have really a recommendation there, so we'll just take no action if there's consensus to do so. Area 15 is Federal Street between Cambridge and Main Street. We've already, at our previous meeting, designated that as no stopping or standing anytime. So unless there's any changes to that, we'll take no action. This is in front of the hub.
Right.
Area 16, North Union Street between Cambridge and Main Street. This is next to Murray's and kind of by the post office area. No recommendation for any changes, so if there's not any, we'll take no action. Area 17, Main Street between Fair Street and Orange Street. That's already designated with no time restriction, and because we don't want to encourage parking at this location, we've previously made a recommendation for no change. If there's no recommendation for change, we'll take no action. Number 18 is Main Street at Fiddle Street. This is the on-street parking by Met on Main. We have no recommendation for changes.
That works all right.
Yeah.
With the existing time designation is 8 to 11.
Seems to. I'm sure if you made it till 4, people would use it, but people start coming downtown or, in the mid-afternoon, late afternoon.
Do you think that would entice the use of that area, Bill, instead of the parking on Federal Street by the hub?
No, I don't think so, because that's open and they're still parking across the street.
Yeah.
Okay.
And it's 6 to 11, Mike, just to correct, not 8.
Okay,
Yes.
I blew it up.
All right, no recommended changes, we'll take no action. 19 is Main Street between North Union and South Water Street. We've already voted to eliminate that because it wasn't used. So,
And the people that asked for that, gone, they moved out of the area or what?
I think that was Sam, wasn't it? Wanted that?
No, some guy came in here that lived right across the street from that asked to have that put in. A couple of years ago.
yeah, the one in front of the Nobby shop, is that
Oh,
what you're
that one,
referring to?
oh, I'm not talking about the Union Street.
No.
Not just yet, no.
Okay.
You're talking about it's a loading zone in front of the Nobby shop, right? No.
That was a little.
Yeah,
Yeah,
okay.
that's gone because of the crosswalks.
Right.
Yeah.
I thought you were talking about the one on Union, Connor Union and Coffin.
The handicap park.
That's the accessible space. Yeah, that's later on in the agenda.
Okay.
We'll talk about that. So Main Street, North Union to South Water already eliminated, so we'll just take no action. I don't believe anybody wants to resurrect that loading zone. No? So no action. 20 is Main Street between South Water and Easy Street. Again, this is an area that's kind of used for loading, but if there's no recommendations, we'll take no action.
I mean, that could be a designated loading zone. It's certainly wide enough there.
They already use it though, and instead of putting it there, and all of a sudden we got a Cisco truck drop
Well,
off
that's
ramp,
the-
and it's
Yeah,
mostly
that would be the
UPS.
problem if somebody dropped a ramp into Water Street or Easy Street, or, you know,
Yeah, we've
but,
made an attempt to preserve that action without actually formally designating it. With these sidewalk improvements, one of the concepts was to widen the sidewalk out at that location, which effectively would have eliminated that for deliveries. I believe the strategy now is to not widen the sidewalk at that location, use a different strategy.
Where's this now? What are you talking about?
This is in front of,
Zero Main there.
yeah,
Okay.
right across from the taxi stand.
Okay,
Um,
the sidewalks.
That's most of the smaller vehicles, the UPS and the FedEx vehicles use that. Either there or in front of the Columbus Rose. Which is the next one.
21.
Number 21, Washington Street between Main Street and Salem Street. Again, that's a yellow line that operates as a loading zone. If there's no changes, we'll take no action. We're at 22. The way between Washington Street and Candle Street, this is right next to the Greenhound bus station. I see that functioning all the time as a loading zone, but it's designated no parking. There's no changes. We'll take no action.
I thought it was a bus pickup there or something, isn't it?
On one side on the bus, on the Greenhound side of that
in the
sidewalk.
parking lot?
Yeah, that's there for the tour vans. I use the north side of that sidewalk.
So
the south side.
why did we make that no parking then?
We were talking about it at one point in time about maybe moving other things down there, other shuttle pickups. I don't think we ever did that though. And we also made that a one-way
It is one way,
as an
which is,
escape out of town.
which is the most violated one way in town. But they, I mean, that could be used for something.
Yeah.
You know, if it,
Right now, it's just a free area that they found that operates for loading, and it seems to work okay, but we haven't designated.
yeah, well, I mean, and that would fall under that 15-minute rule.
Mhm.
They can stop there and.
It does. They do a very good job of blocking that entire way because you can't use that road once they're there loading. But I think that's probably an acceptable condition until it's not. Okay. So we'll take no action. 23 is Washington Street between Candle and Commercial Street. Get my bearings. This is right by the lobster trap, right in front of there.
Well, it's actually in front of, and then in front, is it the lobster trap?
Yeah, because it's accessible in front of the,
okay.
the Legion, and then it's the
Yeah.
spot. Then it's right in front.
Say Osama uses it in front of the Legion there.
Someone sits there on that corner all the time, on that yellow line all the time.
Yep, he's got a permit to do it.
Permit to be on the yellow line?
Yep.
How
So,
do you ever get that?
town manager's office gave it to him. Certain days, it's limited, but it's a long list of days.
Yeah.
What actually is that permit, just out of curiosity? Is it just blocking street or sidewalk or something?
Yep,
Okay.
street blocking.
Okay. So if we
Yeah,
don't want
that's the first thing we gotta educate our CSOs on every year. Is
the
that-
asterisks around the
Yeah.
area. 24 Coffin Street between Union Street and Washington Street. This doesn't have a time designation on it, but it's basically the loading zone again for the lobster trappers for the commercial uses in that area. If there's no change, we'll take no action.
Why don't we have a time limit on it? That open up parking, is it good for parking?
It could be after, say, 4 o'clock.
Yeah, I would say let's put a time limit on it.
Before.
Okay, Bill's making a motion to establish that loading zone as 8 a.m. to 4 p.m. Is there a second?
Second.
Jack Gardner.
Can I have 2 seconds? I want to look at that because I want to make sure that's not going to block access to the back of that restaurant. My only concern would be access getting in there if we had to in the back of it, and if that's incorporated into it.
But there's a driveway in the
You
back,
have to
right?
put yellow lines, I think that was short enough to get a loading zone. If you put yellow lines, you'd have to move the loading back further. And we didn't,
Does that kind of incorporates that back entrance, that loading zone kind of as part of that back access to the restaurant, which, like Ray said, it kind of takes place of there being a yellow line there.
Okay, well, I'll withdraw the motion.
It's almost like the area on Main Street at Orange Street where,
The fire hydrant there kind of makes a difference too, but
yeah.
Stank fire hydrants getting away all the time.
Okay, withdraw the motion.
Thanks, Ray.
The second was withdrawn as well?
Yes.
Okay. All right, so that's our list, and that's our actions we'll send off to the town manager and to the select board for implementation. So thanks for going through that. Next item on the agenda is number 3. And that's the review request to remove accessible parking space on Union Street by intersection of Coffin Street. I think there might be something in the packet here.
Talked about before.
yeah, Walter was here.
Yeah, there it is.
Right.
Is that that's not the same?
Yeah. Yeah, Coffin Street's right on this side of the big, before the people, to the right, to the right of that.
That building's on the corner.
Okay, all right. So this was a request by Walter Flaherty to limit this parking space. We did send the that notice of the comment to Commission on Disability, who suggested that we keep this as an accessible parking space.
We like accessible parking spaces in residential areas because people are really stuck when they can't park. They,
Yeah, there was somebody that had put in for that lived across the street.
yes,
I don't know who it was.
Sonny Mandel,
yep,
Oh,
Sonny Mandel.
okay.
right,
Mary.
yep.
It comes to similar situations with Diane. I don't know if they have.
Yeah, that's further down, right?
No, I know, but similar situation.
I don't know what the frequency of the use of that is. I don't monitor it that regularly, but I'm sure it's used now and then. And we like them in residential areas just as much as commercial. So we'd like to keep it there.
Okay.
As someone who uses them, I can tell you why. I mean, it's been very helpful.
Okay. When you go visit your friends, I guess you can use that space, right?
The ones downtown too.
Yeah.
It's close to 10.
Yeah.
So
There are certain ones that I look for, I mean, they're at
Mhm.
the corner of Broad and Center Street.
Mhm.
You know, I mean, it's helpful, it's really helpful.
Good. All right, so if there's a motion for, well, if there's consensus for no action, we'll just take no action.
Okay.
All right, item number 4 on the agenda is review a request for accessible parking space at the entrance of the Methodist Church on Liberty Street. I believe there's some material in here as well. This was requested by Commission on Disability. Mickey, do you want to walk us through this
well,
request?
this was really a request to us from, I think, a member of the church that uses the church, frequents it, and I guess their concern was that the 2 spaces down in Center were pretty full and kind of also far from the entrance to the church.
Mhm.
And we had originally, years ago, eliminated all of the parking down Center, Liberty Street there so that people wouldn't park on the sidewalk and block the access to the church.
Okay.
This, if we provided a space there, it could conceivably block the access to the church. But it would be
Is the idea that very first parking space, because I see the no parking here to corner sign right at that,
Yeah.
the entrance there, is it that first space
It would be, well, it's up to you really, but it's.
or us?
I'm not sure.
The whole sidewalk there is no parking.
How would you
From there
mark it,
down.
though?
It would probably have to be a blue curb.
So, okay.
My other question is, does that put the parking spot fully into Liberty Street? And then what's our
That's what
width
would
gonna
happen.
be? And what's our width of the road gonna be with
Be
a
too
full
narrow.
parking space
You're
there?
not gonna get a fire truck up there with a car on the road.
There really isn't. I looked at that up there, and you really can't park on the street and
Right.
not block traffic. So it'd have to be up on the sidewalk, as the other cars are already doing.
Yeah.
See, I think it's already supposed to be no parking from the back of the church all the way to Center Street
Yep.
by the signs that are there. But at nighttime, everybody parks there at nighttime. You don't get any tickets there at night at all.
Well,
It's the day people do a good job with it.
it's because there's nobody there at night ticketing.
Right. See, the people using the church at night even park there. You know, they have so much going on in that church.
Well, the Musical is a very good show if you haven't had the opportunity, so. It's,
I
it's
I
a
just
very
have a
popular
kind of an issue with how would you can't block the whole street. And it's not a appropriate surface on either side really for handicap accessibility. You know, with the slant and on the road.
Well, it's not ideal, but it also helps people that are somewhat ambulatory that can handle that, the cobblestones, but it's just closer to the church.
So just make the first space there handicap, is that what you're saying? There's no other handicap space for that church, is there?
There's two spaces on Center Street itself.
Right
Across
across
the
the
street.
street.
Yeah. Which,
One side of Congan and Congan.
What if we got rid of one of those and put one up there then?
Well, they're well used on Center Street. I
Yeah,
need to move
they're filled
those.
every night, yeah.
Yeah.
During the day, they're filled all the time.
Yes.
I think there's handicap access to the back of the church, right?
That's it right there in front of
Right
the
there in
sign,
front.
is the
Right.
ramp, yeah.
so is there a motion to designate 20 feet of curb from the no parking sign up Liberty Street as accessible parking?
I still have a concern
And the
with
rest
that
of the
spot
Liberty
being
Street, you're gonna have parking on now?
pushed
'Cause
into the
right now,
roadway.
there's no parking there.
It would be from that no parking sign up. It would be the
Forward.
very first space that's allowed would be designated as a handicap space accessible parking.
Can you get a sign in there, Ray?
If it's gonna be going up, then the best thing would be to put an arrow on it, paint the curb blue on the 20 feet or whatever it is. Maybe put it below that sign that says no parking in the corner on the same post. Pointing with an arrow pointing left. It is tough because people park, there's a reason why that was like a perfect spot for that one, because I could get it up, I could get it back. You know, I get close to the building and you deal with footings. You get about a foot and a half down and you're dealing with footings, so you have to be away from the building.
Yeah, and I'd be a
And
little,
now you're blocking the
if I was
sidewalk.
that guy that owned that house, I'd be a little upset about a
Exactly.
sign being put in front of my
And
windows.
that's why I said I could, if it's from that post up 20 feet, I can mount it on the same post with an arrow point left. Then you have, no parking in the corner to the right, and then actually paint the curb blue like we did down by Mangus. That might be the only option.
But you're not talking about making a space all the way up to the entrance, right? Because if someone parks at the entrance, isn't
That would be
That'd make a
from
moot point?
the post up.
from the post up? Yeah.
Whatever that,
Okay.
between the signpost and the corner of the building is where the ramp is. So if you go from the post up the street,
From the post to the guy's front door,
Basically.
shortly.
That's gonna be it, yeah.
Because it's barely enough to, even if they park there, it's barely enough to actually go down the sidewalk to get to that ramp.
Well, that's,
you have to park on the sidewalk because you can be getting off the road. That's the deal.
you're gonna park on the sidewalk, but then if you park on the sidewalk and you have, I just don't think it's a very good place for a parking space. Because if somebody is disabled coming out of the passenger side, the car's parking on the sidewalk, how much room are they gonna have to function down that path? One, two, that might force them to park fully into the road, which is gonna block the road. I don't know,
Yeah.
Cars are already parking on the sidewalk. so
I,
it's
ag-
really
I
not gonna
agree.
change
Yeah.
the
I agree,
sidewalk.
but that's, how do we make it so that they still continue to park on the sidewalk in this spot to keep the road open?
Yeah.
That's, I mean, that's my thing. I have no problem putting the spot in there as long as the road stays open. We don't have somebody parking to use the full width of the sidewalk, which is kind of
I think
the
like
third
they're
rail.
parking on the sidewalk now, everybody seems to know not to block the road. I think it would be a continuation of that same mentality.
I hope.
You hope. I know.
It'd be accessible space, but not really an accessible space.
Correct, and that's kind of my quandary in this.
I understand the quandrum there, but I just think it's
I have no problem putting the space in, I just want to make sure that it's a functional
It's not an
space.
accessible space, it becomes a reserved space for a person with disability.
Right. Is there a motion to,
I'll make the motion. I mean, just get it going.
is there a second?
I'll second it. Well, you have a one space there, right? And then the rest of the space on down to the corner, is that just no parking?
Correct.
Okay.
Nothing else changes.
So motion made and seconded. Any other discussion?
I just so we can keep an eye on it, just to make sure it functions as we
Yeah.
hope it does.
Yeah.
Okay.
All right, without any other discussion, all those in favor say aye.
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 Any opposed? It's unanimous. And I think I got the gist of how we're gonna actually do this. I think Ray has a pretty good idea of how this was, I think I agree with the strategy. I think it's,
I see
the
what
work
you're saying.
order will be as clear as it can be, and
Yeah,
the guys are doing the work.
You know, if it becomes an issue, then you just, you gotta find great people.
Stuff doesn't come off with a good power washer, huh?
No.
That's the old type curb, so you can get up on it easy.
It's a good stick. The yellow, I could probably, yeah, the power wash, blue, I love that red.
Oh, boy. Okay, item number 5, review request for extension of yellow no parking line at 26 Western Avenue.
No.
Is there a motion to take no action? Is there a second?
Motion to take no action.
Second.
They put their own signs up there anyway. They do.
Yeah.
Then they call the police to tell them to come put a ticket on it when it's their sign. I ran into that problem for years.
Okay, I think Bill made the motion. I got Jack Gardner, I guess I got us the second on that. Am I right? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Unanimous. Item number 6, review request for yellow line at 44 North Liberty Street. And I think this is kind of a similar story. There's no parking on the east side of North Liberty Street. I think the owner at 44 is requesting really the same, that the frontage of their property be designated as no parking on this section.
In their driveway?
No, along there.
Well,
Wait, is it for the driveway?
I believe in the.
looking at the drawing, it looks like they're trying to get their driveway.
Along my property.
You guys would say there already is one at the corner, at each corner, but then that driveway is actually for 42. I don't think, do they even have a driveway on 44?
Whose house is that, Ray?
I'm not sure.
It looks like there's a
Who's the next
driveway
door?
there.
Looks
Or
like
there's
the
a car
driveway's
there.
between 44 and 40, huh?
Yeah, 42, looks like the long driveway's for 42. The back, that house.
Yeah, I see.
44.
It's got the short
Doesn't
one.
look like it has a, 'cause that's it right there.
I think that's it, that's a driveway, and there's the yellow line that blocks.
Yeah, they just got a little cut there.
So they're looking to connect the two yellow lines?
Yeah.
No.
I'm not too familiar about the parking utilization in this area, but I would imagine that.
Well, this is, what's happened here is Westchester Street up to that point became 2-hour residential parking district. And so people that used to park on Westchester are now parking on North Liberty Street. It's exactly what we said would happen. And they're just gonna get pushed from here to somewhere else at some point. But I don't think there's any That's a fairly wide street there. I don't think there's any justification for eliminating parking there at this point.
Okay. Bill, is that a motion to take no action?
I'd say take no action, yeah.
Is there a second?
I'll second it.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? It's unanimous. Item number 7 on the agenda, review request to make Gold Star Drive one-way.
That's all to do with the cut through, isn't it?
Yeah.
Cut through for the airport.
Well, everybody cuts to avoid the rotary.
Right.
Which way they want it to go.
Is this a request too, Mike, from somebody in the neighborhood, or is this?
I'm trying to remember the lady's name, Genevieve, I can't recall her last name, but yes, again, this is another one of the quirky narrow roads with no sidewalk that's used as a cut through. It's a two-way flow. Basically, there's no space for pedestrians. Her concern was her child, who's, again, I'm sure there's a lot of near misses with turning the corner at a high rate of speed. The request from her, again, I don't have anything in writing, but was to make one way going to Sparks Avenue from Old South Road, rather than from Sparks Avenue to Old South Road. So it eliminated its function as a cut through to avoid the queuing on Sparks Avenue at the Rotary. That would free up some space for a pedestrian area.
Does she have any idea how hard that's going to be for her to get off of Gold Star on Old South?
I was wondering how our
Yeah.
neighbors feel about
And
that.
all their neighbors, yeah, they have no idea what they're doing, because it applies to everybody, not just the people who don't live there.
I've thought about this for a while too, but it's never been to the point because it gets so absurd with people cutting that corner. And I think it is an issue, but I think this is something that it's almost to the point of everybody on that road needs to have notice that this is being talked
Right.
about.
Not to do
As
something
well
like this,
as-
you gotta bring in a petition.
Yeah.
As well as the safety of these, because if we make it from Old South going to Sparks Ave, now you have two, traffic safety wise, you have cars crossing traffic twice,
Yep.
going
How does that
into
affect
it
Milestone?
and coming off of it, so. And then what's gonna happen to Milestone Lane? Is that gonna be, is
Is that
everybody
be
just
the
gonna use
return?
that
And
one
then That'll be
next?
the road that goes.
And that one's really
It's, we're just moving it.
Turn to Milestone Lane. It's a narrow road, but they'll come out and
They'll still do the same thing and cheat that last couple bit.
Always making one-way pairs.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I'm
I
in
think we
favor
need
of
a
it, I'm
petition
just
on that one, 'cause
nervous of
If you
it.
put both of them going one way to Sparks, I have a feeling that her neighbors are gonna have an issue with it. I'd like to see consensus on that.
Very well may be the case. So if I hear back, again, I requested something be made in writing. If I get something, I'll just suggest that a petition be made. If there's consensus to take no action, we'll just take no action by consensus.
And Mike, while we got that picture up there, kind of unrelated from your traffic experience, safety or traffic design, roadway design work. I was in New London and I was at a roundabout recently, and they had a road, like say you're going down Old South heading towards the Rotary, they had a lane that turned right and would be going over to the Milestone that essentially bypassed the roundabout. Is that? It really made traffic move and lessen. It seems to me that might lessen impact in the roundabout.
They do that up in Keene, New Hampshire too.
Yeah, once you
Maybe
get
a
a
couple
certain
roundabouts.
volume, you pass a certain threshold, a roundabout just can't process that number of vehicles.
Right.
You need something else.
I think
that's
we're
the way you
there.
Do a bypass lane.
So, is that something that's being considered as part of these?
Not to that extreme of a channelized lane serving as a turn lane, but there would be 2-lane approaches from every approach to that rotary, and there'd be a spiral configuration for the Milestone Rotary itself. In order to have that handle and process as many vehicles as what the demand is. So having an extra lane on Sparks Avenue would lessen the queue, and for Old South Road as well, having an extra turn lane.
Because I'm just thinking that a lot of people go from Old South onto the Milestone. I'm thinking that would be a way to lessen the impact. And I'd never seen anything like that until I was in New London. I saw that and I said, well, that's an idea.
Yeah.
And they actually had it channelized. It was pretty interesting.
So a bypass from Old South to Milestone.
Yeah, it would just come around like this.
Yeah.
Around here.
I've exaggerated it a bit, but
Yeah.
yeah, I'll ask Rob about that.
Yeah,
Just creating a separate turn lane.
yeah, it worked slick. But it was, and it's right in the. It was
Anything to reduce the congestion.
Yeah, it was a very busy intersection, but it was done so you had to go this way if you're going. The only use for it would be to get from this road to that road.
Yeah.
Just to bypass this, and I just looking at this, I think we got kind of a perfect scenario where that might be something worth looking at.
No, it's not final yet, but if you're on Old South Road and you have those 2-lane approaches, your
Yeah.
right-hand turn lane would probably either go Milestone or go straight. Your left-hand lane would be to go around the circle and go into Sparks Avenue, and that's just how those would work. And the idea is that you would have better flow because you'd have better destination of those movements. And
So-
queuing space, basically.
See, the problem we got now is people are using the water company as a cut through,
Yeah.
even against the one way.
I don't know how much, if that's convenient or not, but.
Oh, it happens a lot.
All right, so, consensus to take no action on item number 7. We're to item number 8. Review request for no parking on My Comment Road between Otokomi Road, well, beyond Otokomi Road, excuse me. No, again, this is a follow-up from our,
Yeah, didn't we decide this already?
it was designate no parking along the south side of My Comment Road, between Otokomi and Surfside Road. This is another request that we just recently got in, and there should be
Just to go
a,
further with it, right?
yeah, to take it the entire length beyond Otokomi. This is a property owner at 24 My Comment Road.
How far do they want it to go?
Well, that's what we're here to discuss. I think the letter that we got is just a complaint that vehicles are parking.
Yeah, the vehicles that are parking there are there because the housing authority properties only allow so many vehicles in there. So they got to park somewhere.
Yeah.
You know?
Some of those people are renting rooms in the summertime,
Yep.
and it's provided more cars. Why don't
No
we,
restriction on short-term rentals.
why don't we see how this first one gets put in place, and see how that works before we extend it?
Okay.
So what you're already doing in the parking lot, building signs, the right side still allowed parking or vice versa?
The land bank
The land bank side.
is conservation land. That's still parking.
Okay, so,
Yeah.
right, so going toward,
By the
coming from
houses.
side, Right side, you can still park on the left side of people's parking.
Right.
But we still have to put something probably here in the corner by, or the Coney, right?
Yeah, I think so. There was.
Just to make sure they don't park right. up the
Right.
corner, 'cause that, I've heard from all the people down there,
Yeah.
they get stopped at dinner and.
We all do when they find out what we did.
I guess it's a red truck parks like right on the corner.
Yeah. Yeah, they're not supposed to do that. It should be 15 feet back or 20 feet, whatever it is.
24 is taking it well past where we've done, well
Like,
past
it's at the end of the road.
Naquata.
Oh, that's at the end of the road, yeah.
It's after that first turn and then the second turn. So,
Let's try what we did first, get that, and see if they need more.
It's not a narrow road. It's a nice wide road that they just don't want the parking there. They just don't want the cars.
Is there something that is down at one of these, waiting for a water for?
Right, wait for
Should
the
be.
selectmen to approve it, and leave it.
The action then would be to table this, because we're not just taking no action, it's just we're tabling this for the review of the other
Right.
needs. Okay, so we'll table that for a future meeting. And item number 4 is other business, and Ms. Champion, thank you for waiting. If you had any other issues at all that you want us to consider, we can.
Just a suggestion on the street lighting issue for the DPW, if they would just put up on their website a list and inventory of the lights that are out, action being taken, and completion date.
Okay.
It would cut the call flow to their office, and, you know, and you could update it on a regular basis. Because as I said, there's, last count, it's about between 20 and 25% of them downtown are out.
Yeah, I've walked it at night, and I mean, maybe I could set some time up with you to actually walk with you so you can show me, because I didn't see
A lot of,
it.
one of these letters correspondence came back from the town, that percentage is not mine.
Mm-hmm.
It came from somebody in the town.
And I'm still getting educated on it as well, because I've been learning that some of the lights are not owned by the town itself, and it's the responsibility of some of the private owners.
Then the private,
And,
you gotta.
and then we get to
send a
notify
letter,
them, exactly.
Get it done, tell them you do it for them, charge them, because, I mean, they're in the public way.
And what you recommended about putting something up in public so we can see the updates,
Yeah.
I'm working on something like
I
that
think
right
your
now with
website's
Rob.
great, because it identifies all the lights,
Mm-hmm.
and I go on it all the time, if one's out, I tee it up.
Talking about the Google
It's
Maps
on your
or-
website, yeah, Google Maps, little red dots.
Yeah.
I tee it up all the time, send it, and I get a response, say, we'll put out a work order and all that. But I think to get closure on it, if you publish a list, these are out, this is what we're doing, and this is when it'll be done,
Yeah.
it'll, and then, I think
No, I
that's-
agree. And it's a slow start, but we are gaining some momentum on it. And I know it's been a slow start for a number of years,
6 months.
but
The situation
yeah.
deteriorated ever since it was a shared responsibility between the town and the national grid.
Mhm.
When it was a national grid, it seemed to work better, but as an observer.
but communication has improved between us and National Grid, and we are starting to get it
Yeah.
get the ball rolling now. So
The other thing I wanted to talk about, and I don't know, this is a safety issue, and this is flooding in downtown.
Okay.
Last winter was particularly severe. Where we're located on Oak Street, we had to respond to 7 different incidences of water breaching the second curb in front of our building. We employed up to 250 sandbags, door plugs, and everything else as our remediation measures to keep the water out of our building, and we were successful. We only had 1 intrusion, and it came in about 2 feet, and that's with almost 18 inches of water standing outside the door. We spent over $20,000 on it last winter alone for that site. I realized the bulkhead was improved. I understand there was some backflow preventers put on some of the storm drains. Someone said something about pumps in the area not functioning. I'm not sure, but I wanted to know what the town's longer range plan was to mitigate water intrusion down in that area. Somebody mentioned to me, I don't know if it's true or not, but some work done to the East Jetty had exacerbated the problem with water retention in the harbor. I don't know. But this is a real serious issue down there.
Yeah.
It really is. And we may be in a climate change situation or whatever, but it was really bad. And that was particularly unusual. I mean, we had this blue moon storm, we had cyclone bomb, we had a bunch of other things, but it was really bad.
No, and I think this is being addressed to the town's ongoing resiliency plan development.
Yeah, we got, I mean, that particular problem is not specifically being addressed at this point, but what's going on is we are, this is a huge question, okay? We experienced this winter, we had 8 tide cycles where the tide came in, didn't go out, okay? So that was different. We've never had that before.
I know,
Right.
had 7 incidents.
Right, and so that we started thinking, okay, what else is different? Okay, what changed? Well, obviously the sequence of storms, that's something we hadn't experienced before necessarily to this extent. But the only other thing that's changed was that the jetties had been rebuilt. And so there's some thought, although it hasn't been confirmed by the Corps of Engineers, and it certainly is not. It's one of those questions you ask and you get the answer, and there's nothing you can do about it, because quite frankly, we needed to have the jetties rebuilt to solve other problems, long-term health of the, access and long-term health of the harbor, et cetera. So, but what we discovered was that with all the different permitting bodies we've got on Nantucket, they all don't necessarily talk to each other or talk in the same language. And a good example of that was the Easy Street Basin, as you're talking about. The town built that new retaining wall there and rebuilt all that up to the heights according to the recommendations that, to coincide with the projected flood levels and everything in the future. Literally at the same time, the wharf there, what's that, North Wharf, rebuilt their seawall 1.5 feet lower than what ours was. And when asked why they did that, their answer was nobody said to do anything different. And so we're looking at a multi-phase coastal resiliency planning project that we've started. The first phase of it is going to be to identify all the regulations and all the rules that are in place for all the different permitting bodies. You know, the building department, the Concom, you name it, it's there. And then to make sure that the guidelines are similar between all of them and not disparate like they appeared to have been. And then the second phase of that one, and then once all that document and policy guidelines, they'll also make recommendations on if there's any new policies that need to be adopted in regards to, you know, climate change, rising sea levels, et cetera, et cetera. Then the second stage of that's going to be more project specific or regional specific. Regional, I mean, we'll be talking about town, we'll be talking about Brant Point, we'll be talking about Nantucket, we'll be talking about this type thing, and then come up with the strategies that can be employed to combat the projections of what we have been told is coming. And what we've been told is coming within our lifetimes is not real pleasant or fun to look at in the terms of the potential for damage. So there's different strategies, although it is a limited box of ideas. There's different strategies that can be used. Some of them are seawalls. Some of them are rebuilding structures up on stilts. Some of them are just abandoned areas that are subject to that kind of flooding and resettle elsewhere. That's what they do a lot along rivers and everything. Not necessarily something we can do, but it's a strategy. So we're looking at all these different strategies, and many of them as private property owners, you'll be given guidance on what you can do, but more importantly, you'll be given specific policies that you would follow in the event that you are going to do any future work on your properties or something like that, so that we don't end up with another situation like down at Easy Street, where this permitting body thought this permitting body handled that, and turns out nobody did.
Our building is relatively new, and we had
Yep.
a curve there, and generally we're in good shape.
Yep.
It's just been in this last year. But what we've noticed is the water actually comes up when we get water in the street there, it's not a breach. It's coming up through the storm sewer.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's because of...
That's a real issue. I was down the corner of, where Lola's is, out of the restaurant the other night, and there was 3 inches of water in the street.
Well,
And
yeah.
I said, what's going on? And they said, well, this happens all the time now. And apparently it comes up in the storm sewer down there.
Yeah, it's not coming up in the storm sewers. What's happening is the storm sewers can't drain because they're below the tide level.
Right.
So they're shut off. So what happens is, in some cases, especially out in the Brant Point area, in the area you're talking about, there's 2 things that have occurred out there. One is many of the houses that have been renovated over recent years, if you look at them, they've been built up higher because of things, but their yards slant out, and they've slanted the yards up now, so the water is now running to the streets where it used to just sit there and go down or whatever. So we're getting more water into the streets. And once that tide level's up over the drains, the water can't go anywhere. And so it just builds up. In some places, especially Brant Point, the sea actually breaches or rises to a higher level than the land. And so what you saw down there by Lola and stuff is actual salt water that's come in. It's, everybody was like, it's flooding, but it's not raining, or we had a very light rain. Yeah, because it's salt water. We had an extraordinary high tide, and it came up, and then it sits there until the tide goes back down. Yep. Yeah. Well, that's because of the seawall to a big extent.
Better not. I mean, we get the stacking effect.
Yeah.
When you get prolonged winds out of the northeast over say 30 miles an hour for more than 5 days, you get the stacking effect, and the harbor can't drain.
Right. That's exactly what happened this winter. It was 8 tide cycles in a row, and it just kept getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And we've been looking at, the trends, and the trends are the tides seem to be receding slower than what they used to. And I personally think that's a result of the jetties. Think about it. When you're when you've got water going out through a funnel, it backs up. And as soon as you pour it in faster than it can get out the bottom, it rolls over the side. But you pour it through a colander with a screen, it just goes right through. You know, and that's what the difference is. We now have a funnel where we used to have a colander.
Basically, the abnormal, the moon cycles were abnormal.
Yeah, yeah. Well, they're. I'm afraid those are going to become the norm, and this winter will tell us whether the successive tide cycles. Before it'd be 2 tide cycles, and maybe 3 on a bad storm. But Jack, have you ever seen 7 or 8 in a row?
No.
No. And
I mean, I own
Yeah.
the building since shortly, I bought it from architects there, but I've owned the building, it was built in 98, so I bought it in like 99 or so, but I mean, you know, I've never seen it.
Yeah.
There.
But I can assure you the town is looking at this planning process, and we're taking it very seriously because it, you know, the indications are that bad things are going to happen more frequently. So, but it's going to be not cheap.
I have 250 sandbags sitting behind my building right now down there.
Yeah.
And
Well,
we did find a new door plug system.
Yep.
Which I bought. It's an interesting system. It goes in the door and they use a ratchet and it expands. And then once it's locked in, you push it down and it basically has a gasket. We've got a couple, we're gonna try those.
Yeah, those sound. Actually, if you have information on that,
Yeah.
if you'd send it to me, I'd appreciate it. Because people ask us all the time for different
There's
things.
3 systems. The best one is built in Ireland, but they don't have a rep here. But I use one that's called Storm. It's called Flood Door. And actually, I ordered it on Amazon. I'm gonna get it tomorrow. We're gonna start playing with it.
Oh, yeah, I'd be interested to see that.
And it's about $400 a door.
That's cheap compared to a flood.
Well,
So,
yeah, we previously just used roofing membrane, wooden door plug, battens, and then sandbags.
yeah,
But this may be better. So,
okay.
appreciate it.
Yep.
Jack, stay on top of the street light issue. I think it'd be helpful.
Sure.
Just one last thing, and quiet.
Yes.
Seriously, go on to GE's website and look at their smart cities program. The street lighting technology is really incredible now in terms of as on-site information gathering. It's incredible but you guys know about this, but it's amazing what they are. And it also, with new LED technology, it modulates the light in terms of the energy consumption and everything else. But each one of them is an information port for traffic, for crime, for you name it. Amazing.
No, we're looking at that. I'm aware of it, so it's an expense. We're just going to look at payback options.
You may be able to self-fund it with energy savings.
Understood. Any other business at all from anyone? If there's none, we'll approval of the minutes from July 26, 2018, and we'll get those recommendations going. If there's a motion to accept,
So moved.
second, and those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? That's good. And now a motion for adjournment.
So moved.
Give me your email.
Thank you.
Send you the stuff.
Thank you.
I don't know if I got a card on me.
I still don't have my cards yet.
Can we try to keep that Westchester lighting issue alive?
We'll add that to the next month's agenda.